Today, we're comparing two military heavyweights, the United Kingdom and France. These are NATO allies, but let's imagine they faced off. Both have serious firepower, but their strategies, geography, and military cultures make this a fascinating comparison. So let's unpack their strengths, weaknesses, and the big factors that could decide who comes out on top. Military size and composition. When you look at troop numbers, France has the edge. 205,000 active personnel versus the UK's 150,000. That's a significant gap, but it doesn't tell the full story. France's weakness. Its forces are heavily stretched. Between commitments in Africa, EU obligations, and peacekeeping, a lot of French troops are tied up elsewhere. UK's weakness. Smaller active forces mean the UK relies heavily on its 75,000 reservists to scale up during a major conflict. While their training is good, they're not ready to go like France's National Guard. Here's where it gets interesting: Special Forces. The UK's SAS and SBS are practically legendary, unmatched in covert operations and elite missions. France's CIOS and GIGN are excellent but lack the same global reputation or operational depth. So in a war of elite units, the UK takes the lead. Land, air, and naval power land forces, the battlefield dilemma. Let's be real. If this war plays out on French soil, the UK's smaller and less equipped army is in serious trouble. France's 200 Leclerc tanks outmatch the UK's 225 Challenger 2s in mobility and firepower. Plus, France fields more artillery and has a significant edge in armored vehicles. The UK's strength lies in versatility and professional training, but the question is, can they bring enough forces across the English Channel to make a difference? That's a logistical nightmare. Air power. Quality versus quantity. France fields more fighter jets overall, but the UK's Typhoons and F-35Bs focus heavily on air superiority. France's Rafale jets, meanwhile, are a jack-of-all-trades, great for both dogfights and ground support. The weak point: France. It relies more heavily on older aircraft in some roles, which could be a vulnerability against the UK's more streamlined, modernized fleet. The UK. Smaller numbers. If France gains air superiority, the UK simply doesn't have the reserves to claw back control. But here's a wild card: drones. France has invested heavily in combat drones, while the UK lags behind. This could give France an edge in surveillance and precision strikes. Naval power, the great equalizer. Here's where the UK hits back hard. The Royal Navy is unmatched in Europe, especially underwater. The UK's Vanguard-class submarines, armed with Trident missiles, give them nuclear second strike capability. France has triumphant subs, but fewer. In surface fleets, the UK's Queen Elizabeth-class carriers are larger and newer than France's Charles de Gaulle. However, the Charles de Gaulle is nuclear-powered, giving it more endurance. The deciding factor? If this war comes down to naval dominance, say in the English Channel, the UK has the tools to control the seas. France's navy, while strong, doesn't have the same depth, especially in submarine warfare. Technology and innovation. Who's smarter on the battlefield? Both countries are advanced, but in different ways. France has the edge in autonomous systems, like drones, and battlefield integration. They're focused on multi-domain warfare, where everything, land, air, sea, and cyber, works together seamlessly. The UK dominates in cyber warfare and intelligence thanks to GCHQ. If this conflict goes digital, expect the UK to hack, disrupt, and sabotage French systems faster than they can recover. Logistics, the Achilles heel. Here's the big question: who can sustain a war? France has a larger domestic defense industry, which means they can produce tanks, vehicles, and ammunition faster. The UK relies heavily on imports, particularly from the US. That's a problem if supply lines are cut or allies don't step in. France's global pre-positioned forces in Africa and the Pacific give them quick response capabilities. The UK's overseas bases, like Gibraltar and Cyprus, allow for strategic staging, particularly if this conflict spills into the Mediterranean or Atlantic. The deciding factor? If the war drags on, France's ability to outproduce the UK could tilt the scales. Strengths, weaknesses, and deciding factors. UK strengths. 1. Naval dominance. The Royal Navy could cripple French supply lines and project power globally. 2. Cyber warfare expertise. GCHQ's offensive capabilities could disrupt French command and control. 3. Elite forces. The SAS and SBS bring unmatched versatility. UK weaknesses. 1. Smaller land and air forces. France would overwhelm them in a prolonged conflict. 2. Heavy reliance on foreign suppliers for weapons and ammunition. France strengths. 1. Superior land forces, larger, better equipped, and battle-hardened. 2. Strategic mobility. Pre-positioned forces and drones make them agile. 3. Domestic production capacity. A long war favors France. France weaknesses. 1. Vulnerability to cyber attacks. Their reliance on integrated systems is a double-edged sword. 2. Naval inferiority. France can't compete with the UK in submarine warfare or carrier strike groups. Outcome prediction. Who wins? In a short, sharp conflict, France has the upper hand, especially on land and in the air. However, in a prolonged war, the UK's naval dominance, cyber strength, and ability to leverage alliances like the US could turn the tide. So who wins? It depends on the battlefield and the timeline. On land, it's France. At sea or in the digital realm, it's the UK. But what do you think? Is France's size and production power enough? Or does the UK's strategy and alliances tip the balance?